Let us pray. Lord God, may your word be a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. Through Jesus Christ our Lord we pray. Amen. Our Old Testament lesson today is from Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 12. Will anyone rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how are we robbing you? In your tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house, and thus put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts. See, I will not open the windows of heaven for you, and pour down for you an overflowing blessing. I will rebuke the locust for you, so that it will not destroy the produce of your soil, and your vine in the field shall not be barren, says the Lord of hosts. Then all nations will count you happy, for you will be a land of delight, says the Lord of hosts.
Our New Testament lesson is from the 12th chapter of Paul's letter to the Romans. It's the first 2 verses. I pivot in that letter from the theology that he has been teaching to the practical application of it. And Paul does so by invoking the imagery of sacrifice as a way of understanding our living through the Word of God. Paul says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So we are in the midst of a series of worship lessons regarding the flow of God's blessing to us and through us. To us for our own blessing, and then through us for the blessing of the world. And this passage from Malachi takes some explaining, because it's not customary sort of thinking for us, in which the prophet is calling the people of God, and especially the prophets of the land, for the offerings that they are making. We're not used to that, especially at Presbyterian Church. We're not used to the preacher calling us about the offerings that we are making. As a sidebar, I would say it is a little dangerous for preachers of whatever variety to preach in matters like this. I thought that the Lord was punishing me this week because of my high-minded postulations about the lottery. And then when it turned out that the winning ticket, only $1.5 billion, was purchased from Simpsonville, I thought, oh my goodness, I have to eat all those words. So if one of you is the ticket holder, in seriousness, be careful. Because that's so much responsibility. So, at any rate, Malachi is giving a message of challenge and correction to the people of God, but particularly to the priests in the land. And it takes some explaining. I trust if you hang with me on the explanation, it will bear fruit for our own understanding of our lives of faith. Malachi, this book, if you read it from beginning to end, you can do so if you just mute the television during the commercials, during the ball game. Okay, you can read this very easily. And what you'll find is that this book is a castigation of bad priests who are bad because what they are doing is allowing bad offerings. It's not like our offering, right? The offerings back then, the temple worship of the people of God would have been to present animals which would be sacrificed on the altar that was part of the temple. And that sacrifice involving the pouring out of the lifeblood of that animal was meant to represent the life that's devoted to God. As this creature is devoted to the worship of God and its life poured out, it was as if to say, my life, from this fruitfulness that I have, I devote part of my life, one of the items from my flock or my herd, the first fruits of my grain, whatever it be, to bring that to the temple and to offer that as life for life, as a recognition of the value of the blessing of which we are all a part, and in a participation in that covenantal relationship. The problem that this book addresses is that the priests are allowing rotten offerings. It's hard to spot a rotten offering in a Presbyterian church in the United States. We're so cloak and dagger about it all, aren't we? Right? There are little envelopes, and there's the code numbers, and we do this, honestly, we do keep it all confidential. But it was pretty obvious, probably, back in the day, when the people were bringing offerings. And if you read in the first chapter of this book, you see what kind of offerings people were bringing sometimes, and what the priests were allowing and admitting into the worship. Whereas the people of God were invited and commanded to bring the firstborn of the flock or herd and the finest sheep or goat without blemish. What the people apparently were bringing and what the priests are accused of receiving are offerings of animals that are blind or lame. Polluted offerings, the prophet calls them. Polluted offerings that are coming from unworthy, impure lives. And because of that, the blessing of God is not upon them. And the judgment of God is upon them, and especially upon the priests who are allowing that to occur without correction. Priests, by allowing bad offerings, were encouraging and continuing, maintaining bad relationship with God. I want to be really clear, okay? It's not that the curse of God comes upon the people because they don't give enough or give well enough. It's rather that people have strayed in their lives from the covenant of God. And the evidence of the straying is the kind of offering that they bring. The world would treat this kind of transaction for a different purpose, right? The world would not see the bringing of a lame or blind animal to the offering as some sort of a tragedy, right? It makes sense if you're doing animal husbandry, that's what you're going to do. If you have to kill one of your flock anyway, why would you not cull that flock of the bad and promote the health of the community with retaining the good ones, right? Your herd gets stronger, your livestock gets greater, you have more vitality with which to serve the Lord. There's a self-serving kind of attitude, apparently, that these people are having. If I have to get rid of something, I might as well get rid of the least, not the best. But you can see what that does there. Just in hearing me describe that. And I know it takes some time travel for us to put ourselves back there, right? But you can see what that does. When I start calculating my offering based upon my needs and my desires and what works out better for me and perhaps not as well for the one who's receiving the offering, when that self-interest tips the balance in my calculations, then it turns out that I am actually taking advantage of the Lord instead of devoting my best to the Lord. The offering is not the point. Okay? The offering is not the point. The life with God is the point. The offering is just a barometer of the relationship. You know this. You know this. You know how it is in relationships, how easily we stray, we get disinterested, we take someone for granted. You know it. And you know how it is that the zeal with which a relationship at its best, the zeal with which it crackles, you know how that zeal oftentimes wanes if we don't cultivate it, nurture it, and seek to sustain it. When others become more important than the lost, than the solitary faithfulness will suffer. And you know, probably, you can imagine, or you know from experience, that when that does, that there are external indicators of it. How easy it is to give a gift to someone whom you love so deeply. We have a son who has just gotten himself engaged. And boy howdy, the hardware with which he accomplished that is, it was worth everything he could manage to give. And he'd happily have given 10 times that had he the means to do so. Because that kind of relationship calls forth your very, very best. And there's no reluctance in giving it. It's beautiful to give. It's joyful to give. It's your privilege to give. You beg to give more. You parents know this about your children. That while we have to be careful about how we demonstrate our love, we know that there is no material end to what we would do if material means could signify our deepest needs. And so it is with the offering. that happened back in the day in Israel's life had caused the people of God to wane in their devotion. The prophet says it quite clearly. He says in the 2nd chapter of the book, he says, "The Lord was a witness between you and the wife of your youth, to whom you had been faithful, though she is your companion and your wife by covenant." That there is a faithfulness to which we're called with God. That is the covenant, right? And when we allow things to come between us, or we don't cultivate that relationship, one of the places we see that falling away is external, in the offering that we do. Okay, you see where this is going because you're smart people. But it's not just about the money, right? It's not just about the money. Our offering, our first fruits are, like theirs, the barometer. The barometer. An indicator, a sign of what the health of the relationship is. And so the prophet says, and we should hear, will anyone rob God? This is chapter 3, verse 8, where we read it. Yet you are robbing me, says God. And you say, how are we robbing you? In your tithes and offerings. In your tithes and offerings. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse. Tithe. Tithe is an old English word that means tenth. And the Old Testament demands, and I would say the New Testament commends, that kind of commitment. That kind of commitment. So that the people of God would always be participating in supporting the life, the worship life of God. In the days of old, it was for the support of the Levites who were supplying the temple. In our day, that is more about the church where you are worshiping right now. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in the house. And see if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down an overflowing blessing. The promise, the challenge here, right, is that we would be so mindful of our relationship with God, so grateful for the blessings that God has given us, and so devoted, our lives devoted to God in covenant love, that the material parts of our lives would signify that devotion in full. It's a challenge. I want you to feel sorry for me for just a moment. Say, "Aww," because it's so hard to preach this in a way that doesn't make it sound like if you give money, then God will bless you. 1.5 billion preachers in the United States preach it that way. It's because they don't try hard enough, I think, and they don't think hard enough about it. It is not that God will bless you because you gave more money. it is that you will give whatever your full tithe, your full offering is. You will give it out of a renewed devotion and gratitude for the covenant of God's love with you and the righteousness, your right relationship with God will be so fruitful that your life will happily open up both to receive blessing from God and to share those blessings with God and others. That's, I think, the right picture. We don't give our way into God's love. That's wrong. Now, God loves us, and the gratitude with which we understand that love, and respond to that love, and thrive in that love, and devote ourselves to that, and not seek our fulfillment in the money that might come to us or that has come to us. And the claim of the world that oohs and ahs about things like that, but cannot deliver us from the challenges of being human. The more that we devote ourselves to the one who can save us and does save us and has saved us, and understand our fullness to come from there, well, the more we do that, the less the other matters. The freer we are to devote those things to God in grateful prayer. Yep, that's the challenge. To hear this without a sense of prosperity gospel, right? God doesn't bless us because we give. That's backwards. We give because God's blessed. And we know it. And we're grateful. The whole thing is about the flow of God's blessing. Right? The flow of God's blessing. This passage is formative for me in the whole picture of this worship series. In verse 10, bring the full tithe into my storehouse so that there may be food in my house, and thus put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts, and see if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you an overflowing blessing. Put me to the test and see if I won't do that. You bring the full tithe and see if you don't experience an overflowing blessing. But let's be clear. That blessing doesn't come because we give. That we experience it because we give. Right? That blessing is there for us. That blessing is there for us at all times. We don't appropriate it. We don't open ourselves to it. If our back is turned to God and we're looking over here for our satisfaction and our fulfillment, how's God gonna open up the storehouse and dump the blessings on us if we're walking the other way? It makes me think that the right posture for our living would be something like this. Or this. We're not trying to bring anything to God to prove how worthy we are. But we're admitting deeply our great, utter need for anything and everything that God can give. That posture opens us to God. Opens our hands both to receive and to offer. so makes our lives a very efficient conduit, a channel of God's grace, the flow of those blessings. Bring the full tithe. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, not in order to earn God's favor. That's been done. Bring the full tithe. Focus your life on the only source of blessing that can save us, and the one who wants to give you unimaginably much more than you could even. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and